Well. What do we have here? What do we have here? The Democrats have folded. The time is 21:20 Sunday. They have folded. They have folded. Oh, this is what a glorious day. What a glorious day. I was so wrong. I thought that this shutdown will go on for another 2 weeks at least. But they have folded. They folded. I've seen that Chuck Schumer is not among those who voted to reopen the government or who is voting to reopen the government. So he's unhappy with his people who are voting to reopen the government. And so he was on the Senate floor, spectering and complaining and whining like a little bitch about uh, about the fact that the government will reopen. But with that said, it's quite instructive for me in terms of who are these Democrats who actually voted to reopen the government, because this is very instructive in terms of what's really going on in the Democratic Party. Like, what is really going on? Because no one who is sorry, no one who is in a blue, very very blue state, who is running for re-election, voted to reopen the government. Not a single one of them. The only Democrats who are voting to reopen the government are in purple states, and Democrats who are in blue states but are not running for re-election. Which Democrats voted to reopen the government? I had this. I just can't find it now, so I have to search it. Because when I saw the list, I mean, obviously we know about John Fetterman, who has stood on business from the very beginning. He didn't want the government to shut down. So there's him, who is a very principled individual. And then there is the rest of the group of Democrats. Can you believe it? Dick Durbin. But we know that Dick Durbin is obviously not running for re-election. So which means that if I mean anyone who represents the state of Illinois, like the blue state of Illinois, like would never vote to reopen the government in a situation like this, unless of course they were not running for re-election, which is the case with Dick Durbin, because you are actually more likely to see what people really think and what people really believe when they are not running for re-election. Because when people are not running for re-election, they are more likely to really do the things that they want to do, the things that they really believe in. So, which is actually quite interesting. Because I mean, if you're looking at the the very blue state of um, of Illinois, like one would never guess that Dick Durbin of all people, will would would be among those who are voting to reopen the government. It is actually absolutely unthinkable. But well, here we are because Dick Durbin is not running for re-election. Who else voted to reopen the government? Senate Angus King of Maine. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Senate Angus King of Maine, who is not really a Democrat, caucuses as a Democrat, is an independent, but obviously, for all intents and purposes, he is a Democrat because he caucuses with them, he votes with them all the time. But one thing that one will have to note about Maine in particular is that Maine is one of the few states in the mid East, if I'm going to put it that way, who are actually really centrist in their positions. They are really centrist. They are not like leftist lunatics. They are genuinely like centrist. So they sometimes vote for Republican governments and Republican representatives, but they are not like leftist lunatics. So that's one thing that you need to know about Maine. Speaking of which, the other senator from Maine is actually Susan Collins. Susan Collins from obviously the great state of Maine, who is a Republican. So I'm just using that as illustration of saying that Maine is is a state that normally votes for both for Republicans and Democrats because it's even though it doesn't really normally get counted as a during presidential election as a what do you call this now as a swing state, but mostly because it has very few electoral college votes, anyways. But it normally splits. I think in every election, what Maine does is that it splits its electoral college votes between the Republican candidate and the Democratic candidate all the time. It's one of the few states in the union who have this law of allowing electoral college votes to be split between the candidates depending on how people voted. Because what normally tends to happen, roughly half of Maine votes for the Republican candidate, and roughly half of Maine vote for the Democrat candidate, which then they tends to split their vote. So this is to say that even though um, Senator Angus King caucuses with the Democratic Party, the state that he comes from is not a leftist lunatic state like California or like New York or like Illinois or all of those crazy, crazy, crazy places. So it's unsurprising to me that Angus King, even though he caucuses with the Democrats, will be one of the few people who would vote to reopen the government and would not expect to be punished by his voters when it comes to the matter of the next election. What was very surprising for me was Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia. But I must say though that Virginia right now is not entirely as blue as people might think. But still it is a blue state. And what is surprising, if the name Tim Kaine sounds familiar to you, Tim Kaine is the guy who ran as Hillary Clinton's running mate in 2016. Remember that? That's the guy. So it's actually quite surprising that Tim Kaine is one of the guys who actually is saying that he is willing to reopen the government. He's willing to reopen the government. And I actually don't also expect that he will be punished as much in terms of the next. They might obviously try to primary him. I mean, you know how these crazy leftist lunatics types normally like operate. They'll probably try to primary him. Um, they'll try something crazy. You know, these people are crazy, man. They'll try something. Like, they'll definitely try something. Yeah, so but I'm just saying that I am actually quite surprised that he is voting to reopen the government alongside the Republicans. He is of all the people here, he is the least likely person that I would have expected to do this. Okay, who else is voting to reopen the government? Obviously, Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. I'm not going to spend time on that. I mean, he has been standing on business since the beginning. And then there is the Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire and Senator Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire. The most surprising thing about New Hampshire is that even though New Hampshire always votes for Democrats, is that New Hampshire is actually quite a moderate state. It's quite a moderate state. So it's actually not surprising to see that both New Hampshire um, senators voting to reopen the government. That's actually not surprising to me at all. And it will be surprising to most people who know anything about New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a very moderate state. It's one of those states like for instance like Maine, who can go in any direction, even though it's not normally considered as a swing state, but it is a moderate state, which one must say, oh shit, that it's actually quite helpful. Yeah. Anyways, where am I? Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. And then there is New Hampshire, obviously, moderate state. And then there is said Senator Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada, the state that Donald Trump actually won in 2024, and Senator Jacky Rosen of Nevada. So this is to say both senators of Nevada have actually voted to reopen the government, or are voting to reopen the government. And I must say that Nevada is a moderate. Nevada is a swing state, so that's also not surprising on the side of Nevada, because Nevada is a swing state, which means that the people who represent this state would never really be considered as crazed lunatics who, what can I say, crazed lunatics who are trying to, um, who are held hostage by the leftist wing of the Democratic Party. That's not something that you'd expect from someone from Nevada, even though they vote with Democrats almost 100% of the time. But that's a state that is pretty moderate and is often considered as a swing state. And Donald Trump actually, if you remember quite carefully, Donald Trump did win the swing state of Nevada. So these are the senators. Dick Durbin of the very blue state of Illinois, who obviously is voting to reopen the government only because he is not running for re-election. Number one. Number two, Senator John Fetterman of the great state of what do you call it, Pennsylvania, who has been standing on business since the beginning. And then you have Angus King of Maine, who comes from a moderate state, even though he's a Democrat. Well, independent Democrat, tomato, tomato. And then you have the two senators of New Hampshire, remembering that New Hampshire is actually quite a moderate state. And then you have the two senators from the great state of, what do you call it, Nevada. Two. So you have what? Six. Let me just check. We needed six Democrats, and we have six Democrats. One, two, three, four, five. Oh, Tim Kaine. We have eight. Huh? One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. Oh wow, we actually have more than we need. Yeah, so this is exciting. This is exciting. This is obviously not great news for the likes of who Jacky Schumer. It's not good news for him. Like, I mean, I suppose he tried his best. I mean, he did everything he could, but it was always a stupid idea. It was never going to work. Yeah. And I don't really know what they think this thing, how far this thing was going to go after it has gone for 40 days. Like, what do they really think was going to be the inevitable outcome of it, of the 40 days? But the reopening of the government is welcome news. Many people depend on federal jobs, and they need these um, this to be opened. Cheers, folks. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Cheers.